Coming up in our newscast tonight. Seoul and Pyongyang will hold another high-level meeting next week. Officials will review implementation of the Panmunjom Declaration and discuss preparations for another summit between the leaders of the two Koreas. Washington reportedly set a timeline for Pyongyang to surrender more than half the nukes in its arsenal. However, the regime is focused on first getting the U.S. to play its part in declaring an end to the Korean War. With more cases of BMW cars catching fire, the Transport Ministry is considering banning the German vehicles from hitting the road. The measures will apply to models that fail strict safety tests. News Center begins now. It's 8 p.m. here in Korea, live from our studio in Seoul. This is Arirang News Center. Welcome to our program. I'm Daniel Che. Once again, we begin with the inter-Korean high-level talks slated for next Monday. When the officials meet, the main agenda will be preparations for another summit between South Korean President Moon Jae-in and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Oh Jung-hee has our top story.
Could the third inter-Korean summit talks be held sooner than expected? At North Korea's request, the two sides are holding high-level talks next Monday at Tongil-gak, a building located on the North Korean side of the truce village of Panmunjom. Meeting for the fourth time this year, the main talking point for the delegates this time will be planning the next inter-Korean summit.
We'll have a deep discussion with the North Korean side about measures to promote the implementation of the Panmunjom Declaration and about successfully holding inter-Korean summit talks.
The announcement adds weight to the possibility of a third summit between South Korean President Moon Jae-in and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un happening sooner than initially scheduled. When they met for the first time in April, they agreed President Moon would visit Pyongyang in the fall. But there have been reports recently that Moon and Kim could meet as soon as this month to try to find a breakthrough in the North Korea-U.S. nuclear negotiations, which have slowed down because of differences between the two about formally ending the Korean War. Another major topic at the high-level talks next week, according to Seoul, will be how well the two sides have been implementing the April summit agreement dubbed the Panmunjom Declaration. They'll also talk about promoting inter-Korean exchanges, which could involve events like a concert by North Korean performers and inter-Korean basketball games, this time in Seoul. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
Also, the two Koreas wrapped up a second meeting on jointly inspecting their railways as they work to modernize and someday link them up over the border. According to Seoul's Unification Ministry, officials reached an agreement today on having joint groups conduct research and discuss which rail lines to inspect and how. The two sides will continue working out the details through the exchange of documents. North Korea's top diplomat held talks with President Hassan Rouhani in Tehran on Wednesday as the two sides look to bolster their already strong ties. According to an Iranian news outlet, Ri Yong-ho briefed the country's leader on the ongoing nuclear negotiations between Pyongyang and Washington. The meeting comes just a day after the U.S. reintroduced sanctions on Tehran, a result of President Donald Trump's decision to withdraw from the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. Turning to the latest in talks between Pyongyang and Washington now, reports are pouring in from various media outlets in the States indicating the United States set a timeline for North Korea to hand over more than half of the nuclear weapons it possesses. However, the regime is focused on its own priorities. Lee Ji-won has the full story.
It's being reported the United States has presented a denuclearization timeline to North Korea, but the regime has refused to accept it. Multiple U.S. media outlets, including Vox, reported Wednesday that U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo requested Pyongyang to hand over 60 to 70% of its nuclear warheads within 6 to 8 months, which Washington or a third party would take possession of. But it's unclear what the U.S. offered in exchange, if anything. Citing two people familiar with the discussions, Vox added that Pompeo has presented the timeline to North Korea numerous times within the past 2 months. But it was rebuffed each time by the North Koreans, led by Kim Yong-chol, Pyongyang's vice chairman of the ruling Workers' Party Central Committee. According to the Washington Post, U.S. intelligence agencies estimate the North has as many as 60 nuclear warheads, but the exact number is not known. Therefore, even if the regime does agree to hand over more than half of its nuclear warheads, it would be difficult to verify that was actually the case. A source told Vox this is why Pompeo's main goal at the current stage of negotiations is to get North Korea to officially disclose how many nuclear weapons it possesses. As the talks have not made much progress, Washington could be losing patience. The U.S. ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, told reporters traveling with her during a visit to Colombia that everything is currently in North Korea's court. She went on to say the international community still expects Pyongyang to keep its promise to denuclearize, and the U.S. is willing to wait if the international community wants to. But she warned the U.S. is not going to wait for too long. The negotiations are proving tricky as North Korea is sticking to its guns on the U.S. fulfilling its side of the bargain. North Korea's state-run newspaper Nodongshinmun published an editorial on Thursday urging Washington to declare an end to the Korean War. It said ending the war is the first step to securing peace in the region and around the world, adding it will set a positive atmosphere and build confidence between Pyongyang and Washington. 이지원, Arirang News.
BMW cars continue to catch fire while on the road here in Korea. The nation's transport ministry responded by considering a ban on numerous models of the German giant until they go through strict tests. Angry consumers aren't sitting idly by either. More lawsuits are lined up against the automaker. Choi Si-young updates us on the developments.
On Wednesday, the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport said it is considering banning BMWs from the road to prevent any more fires. The ministry said the ban will apply to cars that have not passed a safety examination. BMW Korea is supervising the safety examinations, which are focused on the faulty engine part known as EGR or exhaust gas recirculation, believed to be the cause of the recent BMW engine fires. Out of 100,000 vehicles subject to recall, only about 47,000 have gone through the examinations as of Tuesday. On Thursday, a group of BMW owners in South Korea filed a police complaint seeking a criminal investigation into BMW officials like Vice President Johan Evan Bickler, in charge of quality control at BMW Group, and Kim Yo-jun, the chief of the South Korea unit. Padan law firm said it lodged a complaint on behalf of 21 BMW owners, including one injured in a fire. In the petition, the owners claimed BMW was aware of the extent of the problem with the part after an engine fire in Europe in 2016, but has only recently concluded that the EGR is the source of engine fire. The lawyer representing the owners said that the authorities should initiate a probe into BMW headquarters in BMW Korea to prevent any evidence from being destroyed. On Wednesday, local time, a German newspaper reported that a faulty EGR module in some BMW diesel cars, which caused engine fires in South Korea, prompted a massive recall of 324,000 units in Europe. So far this year, 36 engine fires have happened in Korea, including 9 fires in cars not even on the recall list. Choi Si-young, Arirang News.
South Korea's central bank released its data on the financial market trends for the month of July. Clearly visible are how the ongoing trade war between the world's two superpowers is impacting the local markets. Kim Hye-sung help us look beyond the digits.
The Bank of Korea says the country's 3-year Treasury yields moved lower on heightened external uncertainties stemming from the escalating U.S.-China trade spat. Yields fell 0.08% from 2.2% between end of May to the end of June, remained at 2.1% through the end of July, then fell slightly to 2.07% as of Wednesday. The central bank attributed the smaller fall in 3-year Treasury bond yields to expectations of a possible rate hike in July, which would have lifted the bond yield. The Bank of Korea, however, stood pat on its key rate, leaving it at 1.5%. The 10-year bond yield remains unchanged from end of June at 2.56% as of Wednesday. Bank lending to Korean households saw a slower pace of growth in July than the previous month on fewer housing transactions. Lending to the corporate sector jumped by nearly $5.2 billion in July on increased demand for loans from small and mid-sized companies who needed to pay their value-added tax bills. As a whole, deposit taking by banks decreased in July to a negative $7.7 billion as firms withdrew funds to pay their first half value-added tax by the July deadline. Kim Hae-sung, Arirang News.
As for the ongoing trade war between Washington and Beijing, neither side is backing down. China's Commerce Ministry plans to slap more duties against U.S. imports. The country's state media outlets highlighted the nation will fight back in multiple commentaries. Korini zooms in on the Asian giant's fast and furious response to America's new tariffs.
It's a new round of tit-for-tat tariffs in the U.S.-China trade conflict. China's Commerce Ministry announced on Wednesday that it will impose additional tariffs of 25% on $16 billion worth of U.S. imports, starting August 23rd. That is the same day when the latest U.S. tariffs, also of 25% and on $16 billion worth of Chinese goods, are to be imposed. Beijing's fresh tariffs on U.S. goods will apply to 333 items. This is an increase from 114 in the earlier draft China published in June. The new list includes steel products, automobiles, medical equipment, and paper. The trade war between the world's two largest economies has already seen the two sides impose tariffs on $34 billion worth of each other's goods as of last month. The tit-for-tat tariffs are seemingly far from being over, as the Trump administration mentioned another round of tariffs on $200 billion worth of Chinese goods, most probably in September. Chinese news outlets are reporting that Beijing will strike back. A state newspaper called China Daily's editorial said the two countries' trade conflict is likely to escalate into more than just a scuffle in the U.S. administration cannot marshal its mobster mentality. Another commentary in the People's Daily newspaper said the U.S. is trying to suppress China's development. So far, China has either imposed or announced tariffs on $110 billion of U.S. goods. Economic experts say that this is a clear signal that Beijing will not bow under the pressure from Washington, meaning the conflict between the two global powers is far from dwindling anytime soon. Korini, Arirang News.
Samsung Electronics will be unveiling the Galaxy Note 9 later this month. The tech titan will debut its next flagship device on Thursday at the Barclays Center in New York City. Although the phablet's exact specifications have not been released, Korean media outlets report compared to its predecessor, the Note 9 will come with a longer-lasting battery as well as a bigger 6.4-inch display. Reportedly, it will not only have an upgraded S Pen stylus, but also feature a new version of Samsung's AI assistant, Bixby 2.0. The Galaxy Note 9's global release date is August 24th. Sales at duty-free shops on Jeju Island reached an all-time high in the second quarter, thanks mainly to the return of Chinese visitors. According to Statistics Korea, the figures from April to June were up by around 58% on year. The number of foreign visitors in Jeju International Airport also jumped by 140% compared to the same period last year. The key contributing factor is the rebound in Chinese tourists after numbers dipped when Beijing took retaliatory measures against Seoul over a defense upgrade. The special counsel looking into an online opinion rigging scandal re-summoned the governor of Gyeongsangnam-do Province for a second round of grilling. Kim Kyung-soo was brought in for questioning at 9:30 a.m. this morning, as the probe team deemed its nearly 15-hour interrogation session on Monday through Tuesday insufficient. The former lawmaker is suspected of colluding with the influential blogger nicknamed Drew King, who bumped up the number of likes on online comments supporting the now ruling party. Kim has so far denied any knowledge of rigging activities, as well as accusations that he offered Drew King's associate a diplomatic position in Japan in return for support in the June local elections. South Korea's defense ministry will strengthen efforts to recover the remains of war dead. By next year, they seek to assign 48 more experts to recovery work and quadruple the number of staff tasked with getting DNA samples from the relatives of the fallen Korean war heroes. According to the MND, the decision is a follow-up to agreements made in the April summit, which includes turning the DMZ into a peace zone. Seoul and Pyongyang have been discussing possible joint work to recover the war remains there, too. President Moon Jae-in said in his Memorial Day address, such efforts will be his first priority when inter-Korean relations improve. Of some 10,000 sets of remains recovered in the nation so far, only about 1% have been identified. Sports played a key role in drastically turning around the soured inter-Korean ties. As such, there have been continued exchanges and friendlies between Seoul and Pyongyang, the latest being an international table tennis tournament. There are more joint sporting events lined up to keep this positive momentum going. Won Jong-han fills us in on the upcoming footballing exchanges.
During the historic inter-Korean summit which took place in April, the two leaders agreed to strengthen ties through sporting exchanges. Since then, the two Koreas have organized joint events in basketball and table tennis. And this time, the spotlight turns to football. The Ministry of Unification has confirmed on Thursday that South Korea has approved a trip by a group of young athletes to North Korea to take part in an international youth football event. The under-15 football competition, which kicks off next week, will feature 6 nations, including Russia and China. And from South Korea, some 150 athletes and staff members will leave for Pyongyang on Friday, taking an overland route. It will be the first time that such a large group of civilians have crossed into the north since the Moon Jae-in government took office. Meanwhile, the Unification Ministry also approved a trip by a group of North Koreans to South Korea to participate in an inter-Korean workers' football match on Saturday. The inter-Korean workers' football match, which was first held in 1999, will kick off at Seoul's Sangam World Cup Stadium in front of an expected 30,000 spectators. A delegation of 64 North Koreans will travel to South by land on Friday for the event. North Korean athletes will also be heading to the South later in August for the World Shooting Championship in Changwon, South Gyeongsangnam-do Province. Won Jong-han, Arirang News.
Moving on to other stories now. Tesla could be delisted from the NASDAQ. Its CEO shocked Wall Street on Tuesday by announcing plans to turn the EV maker into a private company. Elon Musk said that Tesla would offer shareholders $420 per share, which would leave the firm valued at $70 billion. With this move, he would be pulling off the largest leverage buyout in history, surpassing Texas electric utility TXU's buyout in 2007 for $44 billion. Tesla's share climbed 11% to close at $380 per share on Tuesday after that announcement. Indonesia is shook up by more natural disasters. Powerful aftershocks struck the island of Lombok. This comes as the country is reeling from the devastating impact of 2 earthquakes. Kan Young-woo has the latest.
A strong aftershock hit Indonesia's Lombok Island on Thursday, 4 days after it was struck by a deadly quake of magnitude 6.9. Indonesia's geological agency said the latest big tremor had a magnitude of 6.2 and occurred at a depth of 12 kilometers. It struck northwest of Lombok, which is close to Bali, but the agency said it would not cause a tsunami. The aftershock was the 3rd big earthquake to hit Lombok in less than 2 weeks, causing buildings to collapse and destroying homes. The damage from the 3 consecutive quakes is apparently severe, with almost 1,500 injured and more than 150,000 displaced. The death toll is unclear but still climbing. According to Indonesia's National Disaster Agency, the death toll from Sunday's earthquake stood at 131 as of Wednesday, but local media are reporting figures as high as 381. Another 16 are known to have died in the first quake late last month. The buildings still standing have been weakened, and the authorities say the number of dead and injured is likely to increase as rescue efforts continue. Kan Young-woo, Arirang News.
Starting today, doctors here in the nation can perform hand and arm transplants, a change that will help improve the lives of many. The Korea Centers for Disease Control and Prevention released detailed standards and procedures for both transplants and donations. Back in the year 2000, the government legalized transplants for life-saving organs like hearts and lungs. Now, arms and hands become the 14th body parts to be approved. To sign up for a transplant, a patient needs to wait 6 months after their wound is treated and submit a letter from a psychiatrist. The procedure will be carried out first on those who need both hands and arms. As for donors, they must have suffered brain death and have previously been willing to donate at least one life-saving organ like their heart, lungs, or kidneys. A growing number of Americans are falling in love with Korean cuisine, reportedly. According to the Korea Tourism Organization, out of all foreigners traveling to the nation last year, U.S. visitors stood out with a food satisfaction rate of 95.3%. Trailing behind were visitors from the Philippines, Singapore, and Australia. 47,000 Americans have flown to South Korea in the first half of the year, an increase of 10.8% from H1 2017. Sea temperature around the nation has been steadily rising in recent years. Other than dealing a blow to the local fishing industry, the phenomenon could lead to other concerning changes. The weather agency warns it may bring about stronger heat waves in the years to come. Seo Eun-young explains further.
The seas surrounding the Korean peninsula are getting warmer. According to a report from the Korean Meteorological Administration released Thursday, the average temperature in July stood at 21.36 degrees Celsius in 2010, but was 24.25 degrees Celsius during the same month this year. The weather agency says the average water temperature in July in the West Sea, the Southern Sea, and the East Sea surrounding the Korean peninsula has jumped by an average of 0.34 degrees Celsius per year since 2010. The weather agency anticipates that warmer seas around Korea could lead to a number of negative socio-economic effects and also bring worse annual heat waves to the Korean peninsula.
There are a number of reasons. First, of course, the fish catch will drop due to the rising temperatures, and fish farms will suffer from this result. This will lead to a massive shutdown of fish farms.
Prolonged heat waves caused by climate change are one of the main reasons for the rising sea temperatures. Another reason for the warmer sea temperature is that the Korean peninsula has been directly hit by typhoons in recent years, which has prevented the cold water deep below the sea's surface from mixing with the warm surface water. The meteorological agency says it will work with the South Korean government to try to minimize the impact of rising sea temperatures. Seo Eun-young, Arirang News.
Time now to turn to Michelle Bach at the Weather Center for the updates you need. Michelle, we are expecting the 14th tropical storm of the year, Typhoon Yagi, to influence the country. So when and how will this happen?
Well, Daniel, Typhoon Yagi, which, by the way, is the Japanese word for goat, is moving towards Okinawa, Japan this weekend, and afterwards it will approach the west coast of Jeju Island sometime between Sunday and Monday. Now, although the course of Yagi can change at any time, it's likely to keep heading north, grazing the Korean peninsula. Now, in that case, it will bring in some strong winds on the mainland and as well as a good amount of rain over on Jeju Island. Now, meanwhile, taking a good look at our weather for tomorrow, the country will be mostly cloudy, but contrary to what many would expect, the daily highs won't change much from today's readings. Beijing and Tokyo are also forecast to be very hot. Now, tomorrow's showers will mostly focus over on the southern provinces, pouring between 20 and 60 millimeters of precipitation. In the Gyeongsangnam-do Provinces and the east coast of Gangwon-do Province, the amount of rain will be less than other regions. Tomorrow's Seoul gets up to 26 degrees Celsius in the morning, and mostly similar readings elsewhere between 25 and 27 degrees. It'll be sticky and hot during the day, Seoul topping out to 35 degrees and a few notches down for Busan and Jeju at 32 degrees. Now, besides the sporadic showers due to the instability in the atmosphere, the sky will stay clear with some daytime highs in the mid-30s until next week. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
This is where we have to wrap things up. Thanks for watching. Here's wishing you a good day or good night, depending on your time zone.